Welcome to the Deep Dive. It is so great to have you with us today.
Yeah, really glad you're here listening.
So imagine building an entire house, like the floors, the heavy structural beams, the roof, and it has to be capable of withstanding tropical storms.
Right, which are intense.
Very intense. But if you inspect the structure, you won't find a single nail.
None.
No screws, no metal hinges, just pure interlocking wood. And in the remote highlands of Madagascar, communities have been doing this for centuries. So our mission today, and we're so excited you're joining us for this, is to explore one of the most fiercely resilient cultural tapestries on the planet.
It really is.
We are looking way beyond Madagascar's famous biodiversity, like the wildlife, to examine how the Malagasy people have engineered their art to preserve their identity and just, navigate massive societal shifts. We're talking no-nail architecture, street theater, polyrhythmic music, and even indie cinema.
Yeah, and the sources we are synthesizing today, they span UNESCO Heritage Archives, ethnomusicology research, international cinema databases. And what emerges from all of these documents is a really compelling picture of adaptation.
Definitely.
The art here, it isn't just aesthetic, it operates as this highly sophisticated toolkit for survival.
And just a quick note before we jump in, some of the history we're covering touches on government policies, colonial history, activism. And as always, we are maintaining strict political neutrality throughout this entire deep dive.
Absolutely.
We are just presenting the facts from the sources impartially. We're not endorsing any viewpoints, just conveying the ideas exactly as they appear in the original material.
Right. Just reporting what the documents show.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with, I guess, the most foundational tool imaginable, which is literally constructing a life out of the forest. We are heading to the southeast highlands to look at the Zafamanari people.
Yeah, to really understand the Zafamanari, we have to look at why they're in those highlands to begin with.
Right.
In the 18th century, widespread deforestation was just sweeping across much of Madagascar. And the Zafamanari specifically migrated into this really rugged, heavily wooded region to escape that environmental collapse.
They were seeking refuge, basically.
Exactly. They sought refuge in the deep forest.
Yeah.
And today, you have about 25,000 Zafamanari living in roughly 100 villages scattered across those hills.
And the physical world they built there is, it's an absolute masterclass in engineering. The sources say they utilized 20 different endemic species of trees to construct their houses, their granaries, their tombs.
Yeah, 20 species. It's incredibly specific.
But as I mentioned at the top, they don't use any metal fasteners at all. It is all done through traditional mortise and tenon joints.
Right, and for those who might not be carpenters, a mortise and tenon joint is essentially a peg and a hole.
Like ancient Legos almost.
Yeah, kind of. The craftsman carves a projecting pin, which is the tenon, on the end of one piece of wood, and then they carve a perfectly matching cavity, the mortise, into the other. But the sheer genius here is how it interacts with the environment.
Oh, this part is so cool.
Right. When the humid Malagasy air hits the wood, it actually swells, so the joints grip tighter. As the wood expands and contracts with the seasons, the entire house flexes and locks together naturally.
Wow.
It's a completely self-sustaining architectural method.
It is essentially a life-sized, climate-responsive puzzle box.
That's a perfect way to put it.
The mechanics alone are impressive, but the visual aspect is really what catches your eye. Because virtually every flat wooden surface in a Zafamanari village, the walls, the window frames, the central supporting posts, even the stools, it's all elaborately carved with highly codified geometric patterns.
Yeah, and the ornamentation is deeply intentional. The Malagasy people have Austronesian origins, meaning their ancestors actually sailed across the Indian Ocean from Southeast Asia.
Which is an incredible journey on its own.
Totally. And you can see that lineage in the woodwork, blended with later Arab influences. Every motif carries a specific meaning. So for example, the Tanaparatra, which translates to the spider's web, is carved to symbolize family ties.
Oh, I like that.
And then the Papentli, or the honeycomb, that represents community life and collective effort.
Okay, but let me push back on this for a second. If every surface is carved with a limited number of these codified motifs, spiders' webs and honeycombs, doesn't the whole village eventually look like a giant repetitive rubber stamp?
Yeah.
Like if I am walking through a hamlet, wouldn't every house just look exactly the same?
What's fascinating here is that the strict rules actually force a deeper level of creativity.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because they only have a set vocabulary of symbols, the individual craft workers distinguish themselves through how they arrange, how they scale, and combine those motifs. No two pieces are ever identical.
Oh, wow.
But more importantly, this isn't just decoration, it is literally a language.
Right.
The specific arrangement of the patterns broadcasts the social standing, the lineage, and the roles of the people living inside that house. The craftsmen are essentially writing the social fabric of the village into the walls.
So they aren't just building a shelter, they are publishing a public record of who the community is.
Exactly.
That makes total sense as to why UNESCO inscribed this knowledge on the Intangible Cultural Heritage List in 2008. But okay, if the Zafamaneri represent the physical architecture of Madagascar's identity, how do these communities connect socially across these, vast, rugged highlands?
Right. For that, we have to travel to the Central Highlands and look at a completely different medium. We move from the quiet, stationary focus of woodcraft to the really loud, dynamic world of Malagasy.
Also known as a Vakadrazana, which translates to the traditions of the ancestors. Malagasy is essentially a massive, traveling street theater, and its inception in the 18th century under King Antananarivo is a fascinating case study in, mass communication.
It really is. The king had unified this large territory, and he needed a way to propagate moral and civic values to a widely dispersed, largely rural population.
Right, he couldn't just tweet at them.
Exactly. He couldn't just send a written edict. The literacy wasn't there. So he mobilized rural troops, primarily made up of peasants, to travel from village to village. They would accompany the sovereign and use performance to educate the masses.
And what a performance it is. Based on the descriptions, it is a total sensory overload. You have kabari, which is this intricate form of traditional poetic speech, blended with massive choral singing.
Yeah, the vocal power is incredible.
And then you add the physical element. The synchronized dancing is intense. The men perform these high martial arts like leg kicks called diamanga.
Right.
While the women execute these incredibly rapid, precise hand movements called latsitana.
And all of this is driving forward on the back of an orchestra. You have the mpanga, which are these heavy, resonant traditional drums layered underneath brass trumpets, violins, woodwinds.
It's a huge sound.
Massive. And the performers are decked out in vibrant Malabari tunics. It is designed to capture and hold the attention of an entire village, men, women, children, the elderly, so that the moral lesson embedded in the performance is just absorbed by everyone.
It's an event.
Totally. It remains so culturally vital that UNESCO actually added it to their Intangible Cultural Heritage List in December 2023. You can still see these troops perform every Sunday at the Royal Palace of Manjika-Miadana.
Wait, let's look at the origins again, though, because if King Antananarivo specifically created these troops to travel around spreading his civic values and moral lessons to the peasants, wasn't this originally just a highly entertaining delivery mechanism for state propaganda?
Well, yeah. It absolutely started as a top-down mechanism for the sovereign to instruct his subjects.
Right.
But the brilliance of Malagasy is how the medium eventually outgrew the messenger.
Oh, interesting.
As these rural troops traveled and performed, they began incorporating the daily realities of the people they were playing for. Over time, the peasants took ownership of the art form. It evolved into a forum for rural communities to broadcast their own aspirations and air their social grievances to a broader audience.
Wow, it's a brilliant subversion of power. Like, the king builds a megaphone for himself, and the people end up holding the mic.
Precisely. It completely flipped the power dynamic of the medium and created a space for civic engagement that belonged entirely to the public.
That idea of subverting a medium, taking something meant for one purpose and adapting it to survive or to speak, that really hits its absolute peak when we look at Madagascar's modern music, specifically Salagi.
Oh yeah. Salagi is the undeniable pulse of modern Madagascar. Walk down any street and you will hear it vibrating out of a live venue or a smartphone.
And to understand Salagi, you really have to understand its rhythm. It is played in 68 time. And for anyone who isn't a musician, 68 time has this distinct rolling triplet feel.
Yeah, it's very cyclical.
Right. Instead of a steady marching 1, 2, 3, 4, it pulses in a cycle of 6, like 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. It creates this galloping, propulsive momentum that makes standing still physically difficult. But the history of that rhythm is what is so striking.
Yeah, because the foundation of Salagi actually lies in traditional Ansa. And these were possession rituals and ancestor worship ceremonies, primarily practiced by the Saikalava and Simihedi groups in the north of the island.
Wow, from possession rituals to dance music.
Exactly. After World War II, Musicians began taking these sacred, deeply rooted acoustic rhythms and modernizing them. They introduced the electric guitars and bass lines of the 1960s, and then they folded in influences from Kenyan, South African, and Congolese music.
But you can still hear those ancient roots right in the middle of a modern track, which is wild. There are these instrumental breakdowns called the falaka, where the electric instruments kind of pull back and the dancers start clapping.
With the rombo.
Yes, but they aren't clapping on the beat. They perform these complex polyrhythms, the rombo, clapping in the spaces between the beats. It creates this massive wall of percussive sound that physically moves the entire crowd in unison.
And the genre really reached an international audience in 1987 when a musician named Yusebe Jojobi released his album, Les Grands Méthodes de Célégie. He essentially codified the modern sound and became its global ambassador.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. You have an art form rooted in ancient ancestor worship, which adapts to electric instruments to become the ultimate party music.
Right.
And then it seamlessly transitions into a modern vehicle for serious social activism.
Yeah, this brings us to Nini Donia, widely known as the Queen of Salegy. Emerging in the 1990s, she recognized the immense mobilizing power of that 68 rhythm. She utilized the genre to address heavy systemic issues, specifically gender discrimination and land grabbing.
And she was highly recognized for this. She won Woman of the Year 2000 for using her platform to denounce offenses against Malagasy women. But her activism also brought her into direct conflict with authorities. And again, just objectively reporting from the sources here. The records show that in 2021, Nini Donia was arrested on charges of inciting public disorder during protests against land expropriation in Nosy B.
That is correct. We're just looking at the timeline the sources provide. She was incarcerated, and her health deteriorated significantly while in custody. Despite requests from her supporters to transfer her to a medical facility, she remained in prison and died there in November 2023 at the age of 56.
Which caused a major shockwave.
A huge shockwave through both Malagasy society and the broader international music community.
Looking at her legacy, why do you think she chose Salegy? Like this blistering, fast, incredibly upbeat dance music. Why use that as the vehicle for tackling such intense topics like land rights?
Because in Malagasy culture, art is deeply utilitarian. We saw with the Hierogasi troops.
Yeah.
If you want to communicate something vital, you don't hand out a dry pamphlet, You embed the message inside the rhythm that already moves the population. Rhythm bypasses intellectual resistance. By putting a message about land rights into a 68 Salegy beat, Nini Donia ensured that the message was literally echoing in the bodies of the people dancing to it.
She made the cause impossible to ignore.
Exactly. Impossible to ignore.
Well, if Salegy is about making a message impossible to ignore audibly, Malagasy cinema is the struggle to make their identity impossible to ignore visually. And the road for filmmakers in Madagascar has been characterized by immense economic turbulence.
Yeah, and the visual medium was weaponized early on. Cinema arrived in Madagascar in 1897 during French colonization.
Which is super early for film.
It is, and General Gallieni, a key colonial figure, explicitly used film projections to assert the technological authority of the colonizers over the local population. Following that, missionaries from Europe and the US used the island as a backdrop, shooting ethnographic documentaries of the local landscapes.
But those films weren't for the Malagasy people.
No, not at all.
They were sent back to Western audiences as fundraising tools, basically. For the first few decades of the 20th century, the Malagasy people were relegated to being extras, subjects, or the people just carrying the heavy camera equipment.
Right.
It wasn't until 1937 that we see a true, locally driven production. A self-taught pioneer named Philip Rabarojo read books on film technique, spent his own money, and shot a docufiction about a Christian martyr titled Rasalama Martiora Voloaheni.
And following independence in 1960, Madagascar actually experienced a golden age of cinema. Local production really flourished.
Okay, that's great.
But then the late 1980s arrived, bringing a massive economic crash. The country was facing heavy national debt and underwent structural adjustment programs mandated by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
All right, and just from a practical standpoint, what does a structural adjustment actually mean for the guy trying to make a movie?
It means the total evaporation of public funding. The policies dictated massive cuts to state spending, and, the arts are always the first on the chopping block. The state could no longer subsidize or operate the cinemas. So over a really short period, the theaters shuttered, distribution networks collapsed, and the domestic film industry was effectively zeroed out.
Wow. But the urge to tell stories didn't stop just because the IMF pulled the plug. Right in the middle of that void in 1988, a director named Raymond Brajanarevelo directs Taba Taba, which goes on to win an award at the Cannes Film Festival.
Which is amazing.
Still the only Malagasy film to achieve that. And that resilience brings us to today, because the sources estimate that currently around 1,000 independent film productions are made in Madagascar every single year.
Yeah, 1,000.
Wait, if the cinemas close down and there's no government funding, how on earth are 1,000 productions getting made every year?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is the exact same spirit we saw in the documentary Carpenters figuring out how to build without metal.
Oh, I see.
When you lack traditional infrastructure, you engineer a workaround. Today, filmmakers bypass the defunct studio system entirely.
So how do you shoot 1,000 films without a Hollywood-style budget?
You leverage the digital revolution. Instead of expensive 35mm film stock and processing labs, you shoot on DSLRs. You edit on laptops. You bypass traditional cinemas by screening at local community venues or online.
That's incredibly resourceful.
Yeah. And for the larger projects, a new generation of leaders like Laza Razana-Jatogo, who found the Rencontre du Film Court Festival, they're getting really creative. They secure highly selective foreign grants, like the Sarasari Fund from France, or they forge cross-border co-productions with South Africa and Mauritius.
They're essentially crowdsourcing their survival.
Pretty much.
And Laza is also the president of APACER, an organization that is currently registering the works of 13,000 audiovisual authors across Africa to fight for their rights. They aren't waiting for the system to fix itself, they're building a new one. So we've traced this incredible line from the quiet forests of the Zafamanari to the DIY film sets. Let's step out of the history and the archives for a minute and walk right into the living heartbeat of this culture today. We are heading into the nightlife of the capital city, Antananarivo. Or Tana, as the locals call it.
The nightlife in Antananarivo is the ultimate synthesis of everything we have been analyzing today. It is where deep historical roots intersect with modern global influences.
Imagine stepping out into the evening. Tana is built on a series of steep hills, so you start your night up high. You are at a rooftop venue like the Old Seven Bar. You are looking out over the city lights, sipping a cocktail made with local Malagasy rum.
Sounds perfect. And as the evening progresses, you move down into the heart of the city's music scene. You might step into the Cabaret du Glacier, which is this legendary venue famous for its vibrant weekend atmosphere. You have live bands tearing through sets that mix jazz, reggae, and inevitably the relentless 68 pulse of Stalogy.
And if you really want to feel the ground shake, you head into the Isaraka district. It is a maze of lively street-side bars. The energy is just spilling out onto the pavement. You have crowds gathered, drinks flowing, and somewhere in the mix, you hear that complex rombo clapping echoing off the walls.
And this is the crucial point for you as the listener to recognize. Sitting in a bar in Isaraka, listening to a live band, isn't just a generic night out. You are witnessing the modern evolution of the Malagasy troops.
Wow, yeah.
The gathering of the community, the sharing of ideas through rhythm, the communal release of tension. It is the exact same social mechanism that has kept this culture intact for centuries, just has electric guitars now.
So what does this all mean for us? The major takeaway here is that culture is not a fragile artifact sitting behind glass in a museum. In Madagascar, culture is a muscle. It is a highly adaptable survival mechanism.
Yep.
Whether it is finding a way to build a home without hardware, subverting royal propaganda to find a political voice, or using consumer cameras to shoot films when the global economy collapses, the Malagasy people use their creativity to endure.
They do, and that endurance brings us to a rather profound paradox that the sources leave us to consider.
Okay.
Let's think back to the Zafamanari woodcrafters we began with. Their entire way of life was founded on fleeing deep into the forests to escape deforestation.
Right. They isolated themselves to protect their environment and their craft.
But today, modern commercial logging and slash-and-burn agriculture are creeping up on those highlands again. The forest canopy is shrinking, threatening their principal source of building material and, obviously, their livelihood.
Oh, man.
To survive this modern economic pressure, many Zafamanari artisans have been forced to pivot. They are now carving small statuettes, decorative boxes, and easily transportable items to sell as souvenirs to tourists in the nearby towns.
That is a harsh reality, and the UNESCO files specifically warn about this, right?
Yeah, they do.
The risk of this incredible architectural lineage being reduced to just supplying trinkets for the tourist industry.
Exactly. And it forces us to ask a very difficult question regarding cultural preservation. When a community commercializes its sacred ancestral craft purely to survive an economic threat, does that adaptation ultimately preserve the culture? Or does it slowly erode the profound social meaning that made it special in the first place?
Is it survival, or is it a slow erasure? That is an incredibly complex tension to navigate and a perfect thought to leave you to mull over. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration today.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope you walk away seeing Madagascar not just for its unique wildlife, but as a testament to the sheer unstoppable force of human ingenuity. Keep asking questions, keep looking deeper, and we will catch you on the next deep dive. Goodbye.